During Hurricane Dorian, Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey took it upon himself to provide information about evacuations and bridge closures that caused confusion and coordinated messaging with the county's emergency authorities. Welcome to Florida Today's. I am Brevard. I'm Isadora Rangel. Today, I'll sit down with Florida Today government editor Dave Berman, who co-wrote the story about the sheriff. He will also talk about the latest in Brevard County politics. That includes his story on Ivey's refusal to release his line-item budget despite public records requests for it. Dave, welcome back on I Am Brevard.
Well, thanks for having me.
So you've been working on quite a few stories recently, but I want to talk about one of your bigger ones, which is the one about Sheriff Wayne Ivey's response during Hurricane Dorian, and sort of how he kind of upstaged the rest of the county's emergency authorities as they were delivering information about evacuations and other crucial information. Explain that story and then segue into why did we do that story?
Right. So Sheriff Ivey did 13 different Facebook Live broadcasts during, and after the storm. And he was trying to provide information to the public about what was going on, both weather information, also information about evacuations and opening of shelters. One issue that came up, though, is that some of his announcements came before other county emergency management officials were delivering their announcements either through videos or through press releases or through Facebook or Twitter. So there was some concerns that the sheriff was going out in front of the other emergency management officials that were working on the hurricane. And one of the reasons we did this story was that there was some public confusion because people in the public saw the sheriff's Facebook Lives and were wondering if he was the one making these decisions, and also whether them not hearing about it from other emergency management officials, they were questioning whether the information was totally accurate.
Yeah, and he announced evacuations, I believe, 17 hours before it was planned. Can you explain that part of your story?
Yes, there's a 10-member group called the Policy Group, which the sheriff is a member of, and also other county, state, and municipal officials. For example, the county managers on that group, the county attorney, the head of the school superintendent's on there, the head of the health department, a number of other people, and they reached a decision for a certain time frame to announce evacuations, which was going to be at noon on a Saturday. But after they made that decision, the sheriff called the county manager and indicated that he thought the announcement should be made sooner so that the public could be notified sooner. And he and the county manager did agree to this after the policy group had met and decided something differently. So the sheriff thought the county was going to make the announcement first, and then he would make an announcement. But there was some communication problem with the county, so it turned out the sheriff's announcement came first, and then the county announcement came about 2.5 hours after that.
Yeah, so basically just causing confusion, with people who are looking for those updates. And there was also concerns raised by people with disabilities about the use of Facebook Live. Facebook Live, as you know, it's a lot of times you don't have closed captions on it for people who are hard of hearing. And there were also concerns that using Facebook Live, you're not reaching people who might not have a good internet connection, because usually if you don't have a good internet connection, the video just pauses all the time. Can you talk about that?
Right. We did hear from several people who had concerns about that, both the people in the deaf and hard of hearing community who felt that there should have been either closed captioning or a sign language interpreter when these important public safety announcements were being made. And the county, subsequent to the storm, did agree that they would try to meet that requirement in the future. And separately, there's the issue of people not having internet access or not having a computer at all. And so the county's feeling is that they make their announcements in a variety of ways to get the word out, and social media is just one of those avenues, but they will be working on making sure that the public knows different ways to get that information in the future.
And how is this different than previous hurricanes, or how it's usually done in terms of how the communication takes place with the public, and who is the lead person to communicate?
Well, I think the difference this time is the sheriff being more aggressive in doing his Facebook Lives. He did 13 during the storm, and he did, I believe, at least one every day before, during, and after the storm. So that's really the difference. The county pretty much was doing the same thing they've done in the past, but because the sheriff was another piece of the equation, that made the difference. And one thing that Brevard County does that other counties, or Brevard County doesn't do that other counties do, is Brevard County doesn't have press conferences with the media during the storm to give people the updates, and in a one-stop shopping, basically, way of
like the
providing
governor does, for example.
Right, and the governor was in Rockledge to before the storm this time to give some information out, but the county doesn't do their own press conferences, and they feel the reason for that is they feel the people that are working during the press conference could be better off working on managing the storm.
And what have the county and the sheriff said about this?
Well, the county actually took the blame for the communications problem with the sheriff making an announcement ahead of time regarding the timeline for the evacuations, and they say they will work better to improve the communications. The sheriff hasn't really addressed this to Florida today because he decided he did not want to discuss this with us. And
he has told Florida today that he's not answering any questions about anything from us, correct?
No, he doesn't consider Florida a legitimate news source.
Yeah, I think we both disagree with that. And we're not going to get into the reasons for that, but explain you as a reporter when you're faced with a pretty powerful politician who's saying, I'm not going to talk to you and your news organization. What is your response to that? How do you proceed from now on?
Well, we're going to keep asking him questions, and he can either choose to respond to our questions or he can choose to ignore our questions. There were a number of people in the public that were a little surprised that the sheriff would not talk with us and felt that the sheriff should be giving out public information to all news sources. And we're going to keep trying to get comments from the sheriff in the future on different issues, but it's really his call on whether he wants to provide that information to us or not.
Yeah, I think it's important for viewers to know that even when politicians try to undermine our legitimacy, that we'll still continue to do our job and still send them questions when we need answers from them. Because usually when we write about someone, we want to make sure we have their side. And then again, the ball is in their court, whether to answer it or not.
And related to that, it's for the person that's not answering the questions, it's probably does them a disservice because they're not getting their viewpoint out to the public that they could be if they would answer those questions.
And it does a disservice as well to their constituency because the media oftentimes are the vehicle through which you reach the public and you reach your constituents, and to deny them comment, you're essentially harming your own constituents. And I want to talk about, that's something that's happening a lot with the media now that we have this rhetoric of fake news and journalists being branded as the enemy of the people. A lot of politicians have taken this position that when they receive any negative coverage, that they brand us as the enemy. And we have had stances where politicians will not talk to us. How is that for you as a reporter, in terms of you have to do your job, right? But you can force people to talk to you.
You can't force people to talk to us, but like you say, we'll keep asking the questions, and it's an issue whether all the sides are being represented in a story, because if some people are not talking with us, then their viewpoints might not appear in the story. One thing I'm doing to get around that is if certain elected officials do not talk to us, we'll be using their comments from public meetings, for example, from our county commission meeting or a hearing or something where they are presenting their viewpoints, or we'll see what they've put out in writing and use some of that. But that's not ideal. Obviously, you want to have a give and take with the person and have them answer your questions, and for them, it's better for them to get their quotes into the stories and their viewpoints into the stories.
Absolutely. And so, speaking of the sheriff and the county commission, the sheriff has asked the county commissioners to blow a voter-approved tax cap on the law enforcement's property tax, which is a portion of the property taxes that taxpayers pay in Brevard County. The county commissioners don't seem to have an issue with the fact that they haven't seen a line item budget from the sheriff's office. They have seen a summary of the budget. The sheriff tells them that there are critical needs that need to be funded, and that's why he's asking for more money. What response have you gotten from the county commissioners in terms of how much have they scrutinized the sheriff's budget before going along with it?
Well, most of the county commissioners have had individual private briefings with the sheriff where he explains what the needs are. Some of the needs are the lack of pay for deputies. Their pay scale is lower than some of the other departments in the area. And another issue is outdated vehicles, outdated equipment like tasers, for example. So he's had individual briefings with county commissioners, and he's made a presentation to the county commission about his needs. However, the commissioners have not seen a full line-by-line, line-item budget for the sheriff's office. And one of the reasons for that is the sheriff's office budget is on a different accounting system than the budget for the county as a whole. So even the budget office for the county doesn't have access to the sheriff's line-item budget.
Is there a reason why the sheriff has not provided them access to the budget?
He hasn't really said. That's one of the things we were going to ask the sheriff as far as whether he felt that his budget system should be comparable to the county's, but he hasn't agreed to be interviewed on that story either.
And there's one commissioner, John Zabaya, who has raised concerns about approving busting this tax cap to fund the sheriff's office. What is John Zabaya saying about this?
Well, he feels that there should be a comparable budgeting system for the sheriff's office and the rest of the county, and he would like to pursue that option if, as long as it doesn't cost the county more money to convert the sheriff's budgeting to the system that the rest of the county uses.
And one of the things is that by busting this tax cap, it's going to be a permanent decision, right? It's not that it's only for a year or 2 years until there's enough money to fulfill those critical needs, right? So this is something permanent unless the county commissioner goes back and reverses that decision.
Well, that's going to be a legal question now because the clerk of court, Scott Ellis, feels that the rule that's in the county charter should require the level of spending to go back to the previous level the following budget year. That's not how it's happened in recent past when similar moves were made for critical needs from the county. So the clerk of courts, Scott Ellis, is planning to pursue some legal action related to that. And Commissioner John Tabaya is also planning to pursue a different avenue where he wants a referendum by voters in the 2020 ballot that would require this to take place, where the level of spending would go back to the previous year's level after the 1 year where it's increased.
Very interesting. And are taxes going up for the average taxpayer in Brevard because of this?
Well, actually, taxes are not going up for most residential taxpayers because other parts of the budget, the tax rates are going down. There's about 20 different tax rates that are compiled in the overall property tax rate, and most of those are either staying the same or decreasing.
So it's making up for the increase in the law enforcement portion of it.
So most taxpayers who live in a single-family house who have a homestead exemption will probably be seeing either similar or lower tax bill when they get their bill later this year. And
it's very interesting. Obviously, we have talked about this before on the show. That Sheriff Wayne Ivey is arguably the most powerful politician in Brevard County, and you have two Republicans going head-to-head with him, John Tabaya and Clerk of Courts Scott Ellis. How unusual is that for people within his own party to question the sheriff's decisions?
Well, I think if you look at the elected officials in Brevard County, almost every one of them is a Republican. So
Many endorsed by Sheriff Ivey.
many are endorsed by the sheriff, and that, now that you mentioned that, that's kind of a key thing that many people, many elected officials and many candidates who would like to be elected seek out his endorsement because they feel it creates added weight for their campaigns. But of course, there are different levels of Republicans, different shades of Republicans in the county. So some are more adamant about not raising taxes and feel even though this increase in the sheriff's budget is in dollar amount is fairly small, it's still a symbolic issue with a number of people.
And how many people on the county commission have been endorsed by Sheriff Ivey?
I believe all of them have at one point or another.
Including John Tabaya, who is going against his proposal.
I believe he has been, yes.
Yeah, it's very telling how politics tends to work. But let's move on to another hot topic, which is the arts in Brevard County. And it's become a political topic as well because of what's going on with the Brevard Cultural Alliance. Its executive director, Neil Levine, announced that he will be stepping down from his position. Give us the backstory. What is the controversy between the Brevard Cultural Alliance and the Tourism Development Council? I know it sounds like a lot like inside baseball, but give the viewers, why this matters to the arts in Brevard.
Right. Well, it matters, I think, for several reasons. One is tax money is involved. So in the past, the local property taxes had helped fund some of the grants to arts organizations. Another issue is the arts community is really big in the county. It generates tourism and it generates quality of life improvements for the area. So that's the other reason how the arts are supported is important to people in the county. So now this debate has been going on for years, actually, between the Tourist Development Council and the Brevard Cultural Alliance. And now it seems like it's finally been resolved where the county commission did approve a compromise contract between those two organizations and with the county.
And so they're fighting over who controls the pot of money for the arts and culture, right?
Right.
The Brevard Cultural Alliance wants to have control over it, and then the TDC also wants to have control. Is that the case?
Right, and also is dealing with which pot of money are you using? Are you using the property tax money or are you using the Tourist Development Council money, which is funded by the hotel tax, which tourists pay, not local residents?
Locals. There's also questioning about administrative costs within the Brevard Cultural Alliance. Some people say, why use the Brevard Cultural Alliance when you're spending all this money with administration instead of just directly giving the money to arts organizations? Can you explain that?
Yes, so there was an issue of how much money the Brevard Cultural Alliance is using for administrative expenses compared with how much money it's using to actually support the arts organizations. And the compromise that was reached was that that no money from the property taxes would go to these programs or to the administrative expenses, that the funding would come from the hotel tax, which is the 5% tax that guests at local hotels pay. And so the compromise was $500,000 a year would go to direct grants to arts organizations, and about I believe it's about $190,000 would go for administrative expenses, which would pay for most of the salaries at the Brevard Cultural Alliance, but not the executive director's salary.
And where's his salary coming from?
That's still an open question.
Okay.
So as you mentioned, the current director is resigning. And so that's something the Brevard Cultural Alliance will have to work out when it seeks a new director, where the funding for that salary will come from.
And how many people work at the Brevard Cultural Alliance? And what does the Alliance do besides just distributing grants?
Well, they do promote the arts in Brevard, and they do forums and lectures to support the arts, and they do studies of how the arts is affecting the community.
Okay.
And there's about currently about 5 or 6 people that work at the agency. So it is a small department. It's not directly part of county government, but it's an offshoot that has now a contract with county government to be the designated arts agency for the county.
And do you have examples of what arts organizations benefit from those grants? in
Well,
Brevard?
pretty much most all the arts organizations do benefit, and there's both arts like theater groups and also cultural organizations that put on festivals in the area. So it's really a wide range of organizations that do get grants, and realize these grants are not huge grants, so it's only a small portion of their budgets, but it is helpful to help meet
Yeah.
their budget. And
Absolutely, because a lot of arts organizations it's hard to maintain themselves, and there's great value to, I think, the community theaters we have in Brevard. They do such an amazing job, given how small we are. We have the Titusville Playhouse, Cocoa Village Playhouse, we have the Henniger Center, we have Surfside on Beachside, and I'm probably forgetting someone. We have the Melbourne Civic Theater. Talking about, I know we're talking about politics, but how amazing is that we see these high-level productions right here with local people?
oh, it is great. I mean, for a community our size to have professional level entertainment like this at local community theaters is really pretty amazing. And like you said, there's a real diversity of every part of the county has one or more theaters, and the shows are pretty spectacular, many of them.
Yeah, I recently saw Beauty and the Beast and at the Henniger Center, and actually Rob Landers, who is our broadcast director at Florida Today, was in it, and it was really good. I'm always amazed to even think that this is in our backyard. So still talking about fun things, what is going on at Port Canaveral? So Disney has a new ship that will be leaving from the port, right?
Right. Disney is one of the main cruise lines at Port Canaveral, and they're building 3 new ships, and they say 2 of them will be based at Port Canaveral. They've just named one of the new ships called the Wish, and these ships are a little different than other Disney ships, where they'll be powered by liquefied natural gas.
Okay, so it's more environmentally friendly.
Right. And the port is now building a new, or actually upgrading Disney's cruise terminal to accommodate their ships, and the ships are a little bit larger than the current ships that they have there. So eventually they'll have 3 ships based at Port Canaveral. Currently they have 2, so it'll be a boost to the local economy with more people coming into the community.
Yeah, and I always amazed to think that Port Canaveral is the second largest passenger port in the world.
It is.
In the world.
Yeah.
Only after the one in Miami, I believe.
Right, and it's larger than the one in Fort Lauderdale called Port Everglades. So it's those 3 are pretty much the 3 biggest, and Port Canaveral is clearly ahead of Port Everglades and hoping to become the biggest someday against Miami.
Yeah, I'm sure that's going to be tough competition. But let's talk about also talking about the port. The Port Commission has found itself in sort of a pickle with State Representative Tyler Soroy. Representative Soroy has asked the port to contribute with a lagoon cleanup. I didn't know this before you wrote your story, that the state legislature created the Port Authority, and they can change and amend its charter. So he was proposing initially to go back and amend the charter so that part of the port's revenues go into cleaning the Indian River Lagoon. The Port Commission is not happy about that. Explain why.
No, I think the port commissioners most of them were taken off guard by his proposal in the first place, and which he announced at a press conference where one of the port commissioners was there, but the other...
And which one was there?
Robin Hathaway,
Okay.
who's one of the newer commissioners on the port. And she's kind of supportive of at least considering this proposal. The other port commissioners felt that it's not the state legislators' place to tell the Port Authority, who are also elected officials, how they should be spending their money. And they feel that they do a lot for the environment already through their own efforts, and that the port does have a good commitment to the Inland River Lagoon, and maybe that the state legislature should take more action to get state funding to Brevard County to help the lagoon.
What are they doing for the lagoon? What are some of the things?
Well, they do like environmental testing of the area around the port, and they closely monitor the emissions that come out of cruise ships and other ships there. And they do they fund studies about other ways to improve the lagoon, the state of the lagoon, and improve the environment.
And Tyler Soroy's position is that the port is not doing all it could be doing, right?
That the port has contributed to the current condition of the lagoon in the past because of how the port was created.
How it was dredged. It's
Right.
not a natural port, correct?
Right. And also the large activity of ships there, that he feels the port needs to step up more. But most of the commissioners feel that he was out of place to even bring up this idea. And they did agree in the end that the Port Authority chairman and Tyler Soroy would be continuing discussions about how the port could possibly work on maybe one project in conjunction with Tyler Soroy's
With this,
initiative.
right. Well, and I'm sure you're going to keep following this story. Dave, thank you so much for being on the show again, and keep up the amazing work that you're doing.
Well, thank you.
That's I'm Brevard for today. Join us again next week when my colleague Rob Lenders will sit down with Anastasia Hawkins-Smith, Executive Director of the historic Cocoa Village Playhouse. For more local news and to rewatch this episode, go to floridatoday.com.